السلام عليكم. Hello, hello.
Hello, dear colleagues. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Hello, big.
How are you, Dr. Omer? Hello. Share my screen and just a second.
I'll be back, Dr. Vladimir. One second, okay?
Of course. Take your time. Okay. Dr. Andri, is everything okay? Can you see my screen?
I can see it very well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Dr. Yaman. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, all of you, our dear colleagues.
Thank you.
Welcome. The time is right for us to get started, so hopefully other colleagues will join us soon. My screen is shared, and I believe that you can see my screen.
Yes,
Dr. Yaman,
we can.
before I start.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you one more time. So, dear colleagues, we will proceed with the things that we have initiated last week regarding grant writing. As we said earlier, this training will have 3 sessions. Last time we were discussing some underlying factors behind every successful grant application. Today we are going to discuss in more details the application itself and creating the application itself in terms of introduction, in terms of objectives, setting the objectives, methodology, anticipated results and all other requirements from the perspective of KFAS grants. Primarily, as I said earlier, we are focusing now on KFAS. Definitely, I will use the opportunity to address general aspects of grant writing from the perspective of some other funding bodies, but as we said, the focus is on KFAS. And our third session will be next Monday. In the following session, besides me, Dr. Khalil will join us to specify and to explain and to answer all relevant questions regarding budgeting, first of all, and of course, some specific requirements from the perspective of KFAS grant, which can be very beneficial for all colleagues who plan to submit their KFAS grants in this call or in some of the future calls, which will definitely be released. One of them we expect to be released during the year as well. So before we proceed with the things which are planned for today, I would like to make a short summary of the things that we were discussing last time. And these are, as it is stated here, some key takeaways from the things that we have discussed last time. So the selection of the project call should be based on the phase of your research idea, definitely, as we were discussing last time. Simply take small steps, especially for those who are less experienced and didn't have the chance to apply so far. Simply try with internal seed grants and try to develop your idea to later be able to apply for KFAS calls or for some other external funding bodies. Always consider extending your research. As I just said, start from a simpler research and simply during time, as we were explaining last time in details, try to develop it either by applying it in a different country or adding some new phase in your research. So from that perspective, definitely it makes sense to use this approach. As we explained last time, and you will clearly see very soon when I reach the part with the applications, higher budgets from the perspective of the funding bodies are always associated with higher requirements in terms of the application itself and some supplementary materials that you should provide. And of course, the acceptance rate, as we have discussed last time, definitely are much lower for them. So as I said, and again, for those who are less experienced in preparing grant applications, it makes sense to start from internal seed grants. As we said earlier, the acceptance rate for the internal seed grant is high, and it can be a good thing for you to practice and to gain necessary expertise and to, of course, develop your research idea. Always ask yourself, what is your motivation to prepare the grant application? If you are forced by your boss to do it, please don't do it, because in this way, simply the end result won't be as expected. On the other side, it can also be a good thing, as we discussed last time, to finance your research in terms of equipment, software, in terms of paying for some publication fees, participating in conferences, etc. So from that perspective, definitely it makes sense to build the research and to simply receive some financing for that research to be able to cover those costs. As we said and emphasized many times last time, please don't be afraid of the failure. This is an excellent opportunity for you to learn from it. A bit later, I will show you one review report I have received for my grant. And in that report, of course, there are strengths and there are weaknesses of your proposal. Make sure that you read everything carefully and make sure that you simply implement those suggestions that you have received from the reviewers, not only from the perspective of those grants which are rejected, but also for those which are accepted, because you can also find there some important and relevant information for your research. But in either case, please don't be afraid of the failure. This is a normal thing. This is something that happens to everyone. Read calls for the proposals very, 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 very carefully, as it is stated here. Simply, it is very important to avoid wasting too much of your time simply for the wrong call. If your research idea is not aligned with the call themes and priorities of the call, simply you will end up preparing the application and the final result will be rejection. So almost immediate rejection in some cases, as you were discussing last time. I have had something like that with KFAS in one of the previous applications. Simply, they rejected us in a matter of, I would say, 1 month, saying that this is out of scope and that's it. So it is very important. Of course, there are aspects Dr. Faden mentioned last time, simply which are beyond your control. make sure that you do your best in terms of preparing the application. The things that you cannot control them. So hope for the best outcome in these regards. Plan, this is very important, to plan the process of preparing the application, organize a team, divide the work into team members, and simply define some due dates for it. Simply, it is very important to plan everything carefully, because in this way you will be able to prepare a quality application and so to submit it, of course, in a due time. This is especially true for those very complex applications I was referring earlier, and today I will show you some examples, as I said. And of course, make sure to obtain, this is specifically for the KFAS grants, it is very important before you initiate the whole process to send to Dr. Khalil a short abstract of your research idea, to receive a letter of intent from the President's office, because this is a mandatory document that you need to upload in the process of submitting your KFAS application. So, as we said earlier, these things were some underlying factor, and this was actually the learning objective number one for us in terms of understanding those factors which are required for a successful grant application. Of course, there are many other things which are relevant in the process of preparing application, and those are exactly the things that we are going to discuss today. And today, in the following session next Monday, we will do our best actually to acquire the remaining two learning objectives, to use the acquired knowledge and critically evaluate other grant applications, as I was explaining last time. Now I see the error in numbering. Apologies for that. Okay, so those were the things that we were discussing so far. Today, as I said, we are going to deal with the application and the process of preparing the project application. Please feel free to interrupt me at any moment to discuss any part of the things that we are going to address here. And of course, when we finish segment by segment, we will always have a discussion part where you will be able to ask questions, everything I know, and on the basis of my expertise, I will be more than happy to share with you. When it comes to this technical part of preparing the application, one of the first things I would strongly advise you to do whenever you apply for some funding body, please make sure to have a template of the application. When I say a template, that means you need to fully understand what is the structure of the application that you should submit to the relevant funding body. In this regards, this is the application for KFAS. And this is the structure of the document that needs to be uploaded on a KFAS management system for the purpose of applying. Of course, important thing I would like to address here, this is something I will show you briefly today, and next time we meet, we will have the chance to visit the management system, KFAS management system, in more details to explain you some other aspects. But important thing here is to know that at the moment we are dealing with the application, with the Word document that you should create for the purpose of your application. Later on, you will convert it to PDF, of course, and you will add some additional information in KFAS management system. Simply their submission system operates in this manner. With some other funding bodies, you will put everything in a Word file, and then you will add some supplementary materials on the platform. But from the perspective of KFAS, this is the document, this is the core thing that you need to prepare. And afterwards, of course, you will provide those additional supplementary materials and some additional information. I will show you which one when the time comes. For now, the core thing is that your project application should have the following sections, and these sections are mandatory. Failing to provide either of these sections simply leads to immediate rejection. So you need to have the abstract, of course, and I would definitely strongly advise you here. When I said abstract earlier to send it to Dr. Khalil, this is simply a short description of your research with your objective and some methodology that you plan to use for the Dr. Khalil and the ACK, research center, to have a clear understanding of the idea behind your research and whether it is aligned with the goal. But from the perspective of the abstract in the project application, I would definitely advise you, this is, in my opinion, the only logical way, as in a case of papers, to prepare your abstract when you finish everything else. And when you have all other sections of your application ready, then go back and prepare the abstract, which will simply represent a short summary of your of your research proposal. So besides abstract, we need to have introduction, background, of course, research objectives, as I said earlier, the research methodology, importance of the research outcomes. Simply, KFAS use this formulation, importance of the research outcomes. You will see if you apply with other funding bodies, very often there is a part called impact, and they specify it as an impact or ambitious or both, and then you need to specify. In general, this is the idea with the importance, but of course, when we reach this part, I'm going to explain you in details what is actually required here and how you can do these things in a proper manner to increase the chances for your application to get approved, of course. Anticipated research outcomes, what will be so-called deliverables of your research project. There must be something. Of course, it will be a research output in terms of some papers, for the conferences, for the journals, etc. But besides that, you can develop a tool, for example, some software that can be a result, of course, depending on the nature of your research, of course. It can be a process, it can be a patent, it could be a lot of things. So when the time comes and when we discuss the part with the research objectives, I will give you some tips and some hints how you can define those things to make your life easier later from the perspective of the anticipated research outcomes, actually to have everything in one place and to make it very appealing for those who are actually reading your proposal. And of course, finally, you need to have the references. Make sure, please, and this is something emphasized, specifically emphasized on KFAS application system, to use references which are up to date. Contemporary references. This is very important to show to the reviewers and to the funding body that you actually understand the state of the art. This is very important term for those who are not familiar with this term. The core idea is what? There is something called state of the art where you need to explain what is the current situation in regards to the literature and research in the area that you are trying to develop. And then your task with your application, and this would be a key word and key phrase for writing your application, please make sure to provide the advance beyond the state of the art or added value. This is something that reviewers will evaluate, and this is something that the funding body will evaluate. They want to see clearly what is a new thing, what is the added value, what is actually the advance beyond of the state of the art that you are offering with your proposal. So when the time comes, make sure to emphasize those things. We will discuss them in more detail, a bit later. Before we start writing, I would simply like you to see, of course, there are very experienced colleagues here, so I know they are familiar with these things, but for those who are less experienced and didn't have the chance to see the applications for complex applications for some funding bodies, which offer you the opportunity to have very huge budgeting actually for your research. So I have prepared SIM and I have graded actually as per their difficulty, let's say, and the requirements for different applications. The easiest one, and this is the reason why if you remember last time when I was classifying my applications, I said this one is easy, this one is medium, and this one is hard. And I want you to see what is actually the core reason why I did it. So this is the internal seed grant. This is something relatively and very, actually, to be honest, very easy to prepare. You have the abstract, you have literature review, you have objectives you need to set, you have the methodology, significance, and from the scientific part, that would be it. There are other things you need to define here, such as budget and task schedule. This is something that we will discuss later, but from the scientific perspective, very easy thing to do. And as I said earlier, for those who are starting their research in these regards, a great thing to start and great point actually to start your research endeavors. Of course, KFAS grants, definitely they are they are definitely more complex. As I said earlier, the thing and the application that you will see here, this is the application as a file I mentioned earlier that you should upload on a KFAS application system. And you can see here that definitely in terms of requirements, there are more things that you should elaborate here compared to the things that you just saw in the internal seed grant. Besides that, unlike internal seed grant, definitely you need to provide those supplementary materials I mentioned earlier, such as data management plan, dissemination plan, etc. When the time comes, we will discuss them all, but definitely more complex than internal seed grant. Now, when you take a look at this one, this is only the application. Besides the application, the whole file, for example, for this European Social Fund, the whole file, when you generate it in the system, has around 150 pages with all supplementary materials. But the application itself, as you can see here, has 40 pages. So definitely now, compared to internal seed and KFAS, as you can see here, there are many, many, many more things that you should provide here, elaborate in details, and associate them in a proper manner. So this is the next step. I'm not going to dig into the details because now we are focusing on KFAS, but as I announced earlier, hopefully next year we will have another round of these trainings dedicated to external funding bodies, and then we will pay more attention on their requirements. And finally, in my opinion, this is the top of the top in terms of requirements and complexity. As you can see here, this is the only thing I'm going to show you, nothing else. 327 pages for the application itself. Of course, there are a lot of supplementary materials here, but definitely it requires a lot of work, a great organization. You will have a pool of partnering institutions here. You need to organize their work in terms of preparing this application, collecting all necessary data and everything else. Definitely this requires very good planning, coordination, and management and everything else. But this is also one of the goals in the future. In order to come here at some point, we definitely need to start from here if we are new in this regard. So from internal seed over KFAS, over some funding opportunities existing. To be honest, as I said, I'm not very familiar with the opportunities in MENA region in these regards, but definitely I will be very soon, because the idea is to extend our activities not only on applying for KFAS grants, but also to build the teams with other institutions and in our internal teams, of course, to when we have sufficient ideas, sufficiently developed. And this is the reason why I was referring to ideas earlier. When we have all of that, definitely at some point we will be starting our applications for those external opportunities as well. But simply my idea was here for you to see that, and this is something that we mentioned earlier, depending on the requirements of the application, depends the budget. For example, for these funds, budgets are up to $1 million, euros, or even more. So from that perspective, definitely their requirements and expectations are much higher from the perspective, and of course the acceptance rate, as we said earlier. But now we will definitely go back to our main topic, which is KFAS. And as of this moment, we are definitely focusing on KFAS applications and some advices, tips, tricks I would like to share with you when it comes to preparing your KFAS application. Before we start discussing introduction, objectives, methodology, and other aspects of the KFAS application, I would really like to share a few more tips and things to consider. In my opinion, of course, this is not the point here is not to have these things and to memorize them all. You will all have, as well as myself, this is simply a short reminder for ourselves. When we start working on these things, you will have the access to these documents, so you will be able to simply, this is a checklist for somebody who is working on preparing the grant application to check whether you have covered all the things in a proper manner. And this is why, before we start addressing introduction and everything else, I would like to share this information one more time with all of you. First of all, time. This is very important, especially if you plan to submit some complex project applications. When I say complex, KFAS also requires much more time in terms of preparation compared to internal seed grants. It is very important, and this is something I can tell you from my perspective, and you know it yourself actually. For example, when you were working on your PhD thesis, at some point you're so deep in the topic that when you read the materials that you have generated, you're unable anymore to see whether it is okay or not, whether you did some mistakes or not, etc. It is a good thing. The same applies here. It is a good approach to try to prepare the first final draft and to give yourself 3 to 5 days at least before you submit it. And then when you dedicate your time and efforts to something else to go back to your application and to read it with a fresh mind one more time, and to give it to your colleagues if they are willing to help you and to read from their perspective, because there is always something you can add, there is always something you can do better, etc. So from this perspective, it is very important to leave some time for those changes. Also, please, this is very important, consider not only the application that you are working on, the file that we are going to discuss today and the elements of that file. Consider that you need some time to prepare supplementary documents. There is one interesting thing happening with KFAS that I have noticed in the past 2 years. My first application was in 2020, and the second and the third and the fourth one, actually, they were last year. So I noticed that they are simply gradually increasing the requirements. In the first application, as far as I remember, there was almost none of those supplementary materials required for me to submit. But last year, they have introduced many things. They have introduced data management plan. They have introduced ethical approval. They have introduced the part with the risk management. They have introduced dissemination plan. Those are all supplementary materials that you need to dedicate some time in terms of developing them. Hopefully and thankfully, we already have them. Dr. Khalil, myself, please feel free to contact us. I will send you the template that I have used for my applications. It will be much easier for you to conduct necessary changes and edits and to be ready to submit those supplementary materials as well. Of course, as per the nature of your project, of course, you cannot only take my example and submit it, because definitely you need to adjust it to the topic that you are researching in your proposal. But it will be easier, but definitely it requires some time. And finally, I put here, it's a long way here. Where is here? Just give me a second to show you something. This is actually here. This is where we would like to be at the end of the process. So this is the application portal for KFAS grants. Next time we meet, I will talk more about the application portal. And here you will be able to see all the necessary information regarding your application, and you will be able to apply, of course. For now, you should focus on your file. You should focus to cover those sections which are mandatory for you to have them in your application. Later, when the time comes and when this crucial part is ready, then you can dedicate time to start uploading those necessary mandatory elements here. I will show you how those elements look like when the time comes. For now, please make sure that you simply focus your time and energy on creating the proposal and leave some time for it and plan your time. And of course, organize a team of people who will be working on it and allocate the things the people should prepare as a team. Choose the funder and the scheme carefully. This is something that we were discussing earlier. I'll put it again on purpose here. Check, please, the eligibility and thematic areas again. Make sure that your idea is aligned with them, because otherwise, as I said a few times before, otherwise you will be immediately rejected, and this is something that we would like to avoid. Contact the funder directly if needed. This is something I noticed that for some funding authorities, they tend to organize webinars, for example, or some open day events or something, where you can simply go there and participate and ask questions regarding the thematic areas, some issues that you have in the process of preparing your application, etc. From the perspective of KFAS, feel free to send them an email. You can visit their website. There is an option to send them an email, and you will definitely receive a clarification if needed, if you are uncertain whether the idea that you have would be of their interest, for example, before you start working on it. Also, as I mentioned last time, there is something called project office in some institutions. Unfortunately, we don't still have it. Hopefully in the future we will. But at the moment, feel free to contact Scientific Research Center for these purposes. I have the idea, and this is the reason why I told you earlier, send the abstract to Dr. Khalil. If it is in the business area, send it to me. I will read your abstract. I will take a close look at the thematic areas and simply give you my feedback, how I see whether your proposal is aligned or not. Of course, this is not the absolute truth, but this is a feedback that you will receive, which can help you to determine and to make the final decision whether You will go with it or not. Don't waste your time. This is very important. If you see that your idea is not aligned, don't push it for any price, for any cost. Simply, if this is not the call for you, work on your idea through some internal seed grant, because as we said earlier, for internal seed grants, there are no limitations in terms of, in these regards. Work on your idea, develop it, and eventually you will find, and I will help you, and Scientific Research Center will help you to find some scheme which matches your interests and your research. So from that perspective, simply, if you see that this is not a good match for you, don't waste your time for preparing the applications, which is going to be rejected immediately. Discuss the idea. This is also very important. One of the things, in my opinion, one of the most important things to participate, I will make here a comparison with papers. One of the most important things to participate in a scientific conference is to present your research, to present preliminary results, to present the design of your research, and to receive a feedback from your peers, from the people who are in this area, and they will give you some ideas how you can develop your research further, improve it, etc. The same thing applies here. Discuss the idea that you have with your colleagues, and discuss, as I said earlier, with the Scientific Research Center. Send me a short draft, I will read it, and I will tell you what do I think about it. But try to formulate it in a proper manner, to have short, brief background, to have an objective, some description of the methodology that you plan to use, etc. Simply to have all those mandatory elements that we can make some assessment on the basis of those things. But definitely don't be afraid to discuss. This is something I've noticed, maybe I'm wrong, in general, not only AU. People tend to be afraid to discuss their ideas. I don't know what are the reasons. Maybe somebody will steal the idea or something, but don't be afraid of that. Simply discuss it, receive feedback, options for improvements, etc. It can only benefit your research and the things that you are working on. This is extremely important from my perspective. For everything you do, I am a marketing professor and digital marketing professor. And when I teach my students, the first thing I tell them, please make sure to identify who is the targeted audience, to whom you are preparing a content that you are working on, for example. The same thing applies here. You are preparing a product here, a product called project application. And this product will have two targeted audiences, at least, evaluating them, at least. The first one is the fund. They have a program board who will execute the initial screening of your proposal to see whether it is aligned with the thematic areas and the priorities in the call. Make sure to cover those priority areas. You remember last time I showed you that call for, I think it was for European Social Fund. I showed you how I was reading the file and simply highlighting those parts which are extremely important in terms of priority areas, strategic documents, etc. Why? Not only to remind myself on those things, but to implement those things later in the application. Do the same thing with KFAS. Read the call, identify key things, and implement them in your application. Put them in the text that you are working on, simply for in the abstract, in the title, as we were discussing earlier, to increase your chances. As we said, and as Dr. Frieden commented last time, you can never guarantee. There are some other things maybe you cannot anticipate, which are affecting the final decision. But do your best to prepare it in the best possible manner. So this is the first instance, which is evaluating your proposal. There is another one, very important, actually the most important one, the second stage, reviewers, evaluators. Those are people who are experts in the field of your research. Of course, you will see later comments I have received from my reviewer. The guy says, I'm not in this area with disabilities, but I would say this, and this is okay. Why? Because there are some norms, there are some criteria that every project application needs to fulfill. And everybody who is evaluating them, who is competent enough, will see and understand whether you have covered those things or not. If not, unfortunately, your grades and your scores actually will be poor. And this is something we would like to avoid. This is the first thing. The second thing, those experts, sorry, are busy. And this is the reason why I have marked this word here in red. Why? Because you know it yourself. We are all educators. When you receive a paper, an assignment from a student, which is messy, not properly formatted, without any form in any regards, and you start reading it, and it is hard to read, etc., you will never grade this assignment with a good grade. Never. The same applies here. Wrap your application to be appealing, not only from the perspective of the content that you will provide there. This is the most important part, of course. But please format it. Use check spelling and grammar. Use different colors. Feel free. Use graphs, please. This is very important. Later, I will show you some examples. Make some graphical representations of your methodology, of your concept, or some things that you will do in your project. This is very important. This is because at the final stage, reviewer is assessing not only the quality of your proposal. This is one thing they are assessing. They're also assessing whether you, as a PI, and your team, whether you are capable in delivering and completing this project. What would be the purpose for KFAS or any other funding body if they approve the grant for you and simply you don't deliver it? So from that perspective, this is also the fact that they are evaluating. And when they see beautifully packed application with all these elements and things to consider, they will say, okay, these guys showed me that they know how to do it. So from that perspective, it is also important. Also, in marketing, this is something we teach our students. When you, for example, have a landing page for some website you have created and you want your customer to land there and to start investigating about your product and service, you have 2 to 3 seconds to grab their attention and to acquire the customer eventually. If we make a parallel with the reviewer, definitely reviewer will review. He's not a regular customer, so the reviewer cannot see I'm leaving this application and that's it. No, the reviewer will review. But the core thing is to make it appealing to the reviewer, to make the reviewer want to read your proposal, to find out something new, to see something new in your data, to see a progress in your data, to find out about the current state of the art in the field. If they recognize these things, they will be motivated to read it. And of course, the language that you're using. Use simple sentences. Don't complicate the things. Don't complicate your life and the life of those who are reviewing. These are some things I will put in the following several notes. And this is very important, as I said here. How reviewers evaluate your proposal. This is extremely important from my perspective. Please make sure before you start preparing your proposal, what are the assessment criteria that this funding body is going to use? Because for every call, there are assessment criteria. For KFAS, I will show you an example of the reviewer form that we have received for our project, and you will see. This is for the project which was approved, actually, in December last year. And what are the elements they are assessing? As you can see, for every element, they have strengths, they have weaknesses. And for the originality, this is the first one, 10 points is the maximum for this one. So we actually lost 1 point here. Okay, this is absolutely okay. For the things such as scientific merit, as you can see here, 40 points is the maximum, and they are assessing it. But as you can see here, they have a specific question to answer. Are the appropriate facilities or equipment outlined? So in these regards, simply make sure that you cover these things in your proposal. Again, weaknesses, strengths for different options. Simply, we're not going to analyze every option, but I want to show you the criteria. Path to success. In other words, this is often called implementation plan. So you have the idea, you have the team, and you need to show me that you have a good implementation plan to actually conduct this research. As you can see here, we have received 20 points out of 30, which is a maximum, meaning that we definitely failed in some aspects. And as I said earlier, when I read the weaknesses here, these are the things we need to pay attention on when the time comes to implement our project and to work on it. Expected outputs for the proposed work. This is the fourth element, and it weights 10%. And there is one more, if I'm not wrong. Just give me a second. This is the final recommendation. I think there is one more before that. Just give me a second to check. Expected outputs. Okay. No, obviously not. Yeah. So these are the elements they are using to assess your proposal. It is a good thing always to be familiar with these requirements. Why? Because if you are familiar with them, you will make sure to cover them in a best possible manner in your application and to be able to simply receive later the highest possible score for them. This is the core idea. So it is always a good thing to read again the call carefully and to find them. For KFAS call, simply for your info, you will find a KFAS grant manual in which those elements I just explained here are specified. Of course, as you can see here, this is the link. I put these documents here. They will be available under the team, so you will be able to open this and to simply read it, to see how, especially for those who didn't have the chance to receive those review forms, how those things look from the perspective of the evaluator of your proposal. And this part is related to the things I was explaining earlier. The first 1 to 2 pages are the most important. This is where you need to do a lot of things, as it is stated here. First of all, you need to sell your story to somebody. As I said, you have targeted audiences, you have evaluators, you have the fund, and you need to persuade them that you are capable of doing it and that your idea is good and that it makes and creates an additional value to the scientific community and, of course, for the specific country, in this case, Kuwait. So from this perspective, as I said, please make sure that you cover those not only scientific aspects of your proposal, but also technical aspects such as formatting and everything else. And it is clearly stated here. I put here again, the first 1 or 2 pages are the most important. In a bit later, we will discuss these things in more details, and I will explain you how you can do some nice things here. Be concise, be precise. Don't use complex sentences, don't use complex language. Try to explain it in a simple manner. Why? As I said earlier, educate your reviewer also. They are the experts in the field, but maybe they are not 100% in the topic that you are investigating. And they need to find out whether the things and the claims that you put in your proposal actually make sense or not. In order to do so, you need to provide them with the sufficient details, of course, and in a way which is comprehensive for them. So from that perspective, as I said earlier, when you prepare your application, give it to your colleagues or somebody, if you're working in a team, even easier, tell it to your colleagues, please read. Tell me what do you think, whether we have omitted something, maybe we can add something, etc. So this will definitely all increase the chances for your proposal later to be evaluated with a high score. Something I put here as a note for the moment, I will explain later in more details. Quantify everything. What do I mean by this? If you say, for example, our research output will be a conference paper, put the number and say, okay, we plan to publish 2 conference papers during the realization of this project. Or if you say, for example, one of the objectives for our research is to develop the assessment tool, for example. How you can quantify this part? You can say, and this is very important, in several minutes we will discuss it. You will say, we will accomplish this goal in project month, let's say 10, and there will be a tool which will be hosted on a certain location. And then you have quantified the things that you stated. Not only statements without any confirmation, let's say, and any way to check them. So in these regards, it is very important to put and to quantify everything that's possible. Later on, I will show you some other examples as well. Use graphics, as I said. I will show you the example how you can use graphics for methodology, for introduction even, etc. Also, this part is important. Feel free to acknowledge weaknesses of your research. Very often, people tend to hide the weaknesses. because they are afraid that they will get rejected. Quite opposite. If you say, we have identified this as a potential weakness in our research, you actually show to the evaluator that you are fully aware of the whole research context for your proposal and for your research, and fully aware of the potential limitations. So in these regards, please feel free to acknowledge them in your application. Of course, as I said earlier, spelling, grammar, for us who are not native speakers, for everybody actually, please do necessary corrections and changes. Use the services available for these purposes, such as Grammarly. Simply, as I said earlier, you are here to prepare a product and to sell it to someone. That product has the price, and the price for that product is actually the budget that you will receive in your application. So somebody will give you the money to go on with this project. It is important to show to that somebody, which is the institution itself and the evaluator, as we said earlier, that you are capable of doing so. Small things will give them a clue whether you can do it or not. Why small things are important? Because as we discussed earlier, for internal seed grants, the acceptance rate is high. Those small things are important, but not that important. But imagine Horizon projects, where the acceptance rate is 5%. Every small detail counts. So in these regards, you need to do your best to prepare it in a proper manner and to sell it as a final product, which has a strictly and very precisely defined form and everything else. Don't do it just to do it. As I said earlier, if you're doing it for your boss, don't do it, because in this way, simply you will use your time, you will waste other people's time to review the application, which is not appropriate, simply a waste of time for everybody. Don't do it. Make sure you have your own reasons and you understand your own reasons in preparing and submitting a project application. And in this regards, that will motivate you to push forward, of course. Okay, so those were some introductory things related to preparing before we start actually writing our project application. One more time, I wanted to share these things with you and with all of us, simply as a roadmap and as a checklist, actually, before we start, to make sure that we have covered everything and that we understand what is the point. Now, this is a technical part where you need to start elaborating your idea into a proposal. This is the core idea of the story. I put here on purpose, and I put the title, as you can see here, KFAS help text. This is the part. You always receive those help texts from funding bodies for every section of your application. Simply they put some questions. This is one way they can do it, or KFAS simply gives you this and says, introduction / background. The main purpose of the section is to provide the necessary background and the context of the research problems, with focus on the specific research question and hypothesis. The appropriate historical background, literature review, this is the state of the art I mentioned earlier. Brief, but it needs to be there. You need to show what is the current state of the art in regards to your research. And then, when you have it clearly set and identified, what is the advance beyond the state of the art that you and your research are bringing to the table. This is the same approach as with the papers. Of course, this is all research. Only now you're making a proposal. When you write a paper, usually you already have the data and everything else. So you're creating a sort of report. This is the difference, but the core idea definitely is the same. Of the proposed problem, issues should be supported by the most relevant recent references, as we said earlier, very important, thus emphasizing the significance of the project, the added value that you are providing. So this is how you receive it from KFAS. These are some things I would like all of us to think and to use them, of course, when the time comes. And I would like to emphasize one more time, Professor Alpert actually explained these things in a perfect manner during his training. I put this graphical representation here simply as a reminder for everybody who is working on the introduction section of the research proposal or paper, because the same approach applies here. You need to provide the answer to some very simple questions here. First of all, before I proceed with the questions, as you can see here, in some funding bodies, you will find this section as motivation, needs analysis, background. Simply, it differs. It can be a separate section or it can be all one section. Again, this depends on the funding authority, but those things I put here can be very important. I will explain you in one example very soon. But as I said, there are some questions you need to identify and explain. What is the problem actually? Where do you see the problem in the current state of the art? What is happening that you can resolve and provide a solution with your research? And why is it important? Why is it important to tackle that problem, first of all? And secondly, why your research is important? This is the part with the added value. So this is the state of the art, and this is something I'm providing beyond the state of the art. In order to make these things more practical, simply we can explain these things in this manner, explaining the questions and everything else. But simply, I'm going to give you an example of the research that I was working on with my colleagues. And as you noticed last time when I was showing you the data on those applications, we actually submitted so far 4 applications on the basis of that research idea. So I'm going to start from a sketch and explain you how everything started. And then I'm going to show you how we have created an introduction for one of our project applications related to this idea. What is the point of the story? Simply, I was wondered because I am one of the people who works remotely. And I was wondering, that was one aspect of the story for me personally to initiate my interest in this. Sorry. I'm receiving some calls for some reason. Sorry. This was the interest for me to step into this research. On the other side, I was also interested. I saw people with disabilities, and a matter of the common sense is that those people definitely have a hard time when it comes to finding a proper employment and in terms of earning some income for them and their families. And this was a common sense idea that initiated my interest in the area. And I was interested to see whether remote work as a concept and the opportunities existing on the internet can provide the opportunity for those people to simply enroll and to earn some income for them and for their families. This was how everything started. At that point, I didn't know anything in terms of number of those people, their position on the market. When I say market, I mean labor market. I didn't know anything about, of course, from practical perspective, I'm aware of the fact that we are having many platforms such as Upwork, Top Talent and many others, Freelancer, etc. I'm aware of them, but I wasn't aware of the offering of the remote positions when it comes to these people and their possibilities to enroll. So this was the starting point. When we initiated the whole thing and when we started preparing the introductory part for it, we actually used the approach which is stated here, which I would like to emphasize as a critical one, not only for research, but also for, when I say research, I mean proposals, but also for the papers. A funnel approach. This is extremely important to follow this approach and to lead actually the reader, the evaluator, from a broader perspective to the specific problem and to offer solutions. Because a person reading your introduction in this way, structured in this way, will have a clear understanding how you perceive the problem and how you perceive the solutions and how you are going to provide an added value in these regards. And as you can see here, I need to zoom this part because I cannot see, to be honest. So first instance, start with a broad statement to set the context. Second one, state what is known, the state of the art, as I said earlier. Then identify the problem. Then state how your study aims to address the problem. What are you going to do to address this problem? and what is your research question and or hypothesis of your research. This is the approach. And then when we apply it on this idea I was referring to earlier, okay, so when I apply it here, this is the application. Let me show you something. I was trying to mark the text here in the similar manner. This is not, of course, not 100% accurate, but I was using the highlighter existing in a PDF files to show you how actually in this proposal we used a funnel approach. What was the idea? As you can see here, a broad context, and we started here not with the people with disabilities. We started here from internet and the opportunities existing on the internet in terms of digital entrepreneurship and remote work positions. And we said, this is something that already exists, and this is the broad context. This is something that provides opportunities for everybody, not only for the people with disabilities, but for general public, let's say. But definitely, we of course use some sources here to say, okay, there is a number of these, I don't know, remote work positions, digital entrepreneurship generates revenues, and then you cite some sources, etc. On the other side, it gives the opportunity for the persons without disabilities, as it is stated here, and the people with disabilities. It provides almost equal opportunities to enroll. And then we start elaborating persons with disabilities. And then we came to the data, which was, for me, to be honest, I didn't expect something like that. Around 15% of the whole world's population are people with disabilities, meaning that this is a huge problem worldwide, not only in Serbia or Kuwait or, I don't know, worldwide. There are so many people with disabilities, and then we have identified the data, as you can see here, regarding their employment and their exclusion from the labor market. And we identified, and we find out actually that depending on the country, more than 50% in some cases of those people are unemployed and in risk of poverty. And this is the problem. This is how we identify the problem. The problem is we have people with disabilities unable to participate in the labor market. We have people with disabilities in a risk of poverty. And the question is, what can we do about it? Is there some solution? And this is where we have explained in this part, there is a solution for that. Remote work represents a solution. But again, another problem. What is the problem? If you want to participate in remote work, you need to have some competencies for that. It is not just a matter, I have an internet and I have the I don't know, Google Chrome, and that's it. I will be able to work on Upwork. Of course, the tasks that you can do remotely definitely differ. And there are some simple tasks you can do. There are some complex jobs that you can do. But you definitely need to have some competencies for that. So from that perspective, again, we have associated it with the current research in the literature. And then we said, okay, definitely for remote work as a solution, people need to have certain levels of competencies. But what is the problem? What is the gap in the literature? Nobody did it so far. As Professor Alper said earlier, this is a wise thing to do. It is not a good thing to say nobody did it, we are the first one. As far as we know, as per our knowledge. And actually you need to provide, of course, and you need to conduct a thorough literature research and review here to see whether somebody did something like that. We investigated and find out that nobody did it. And then we have provided a solution. And the final stage says here, as you can see here, project. This is the acronym. This is something which is used for European, as far as I know, for European, maybe in other parts of the world, of course, but they tend to use it as an acronym for the project, not the full title. Of course, there is a full title and the acronym. This is irrelevant. The important thing, we say here, project aims to build remote work competencies for those people in the area of digital marketing. I will explain more why digital marketing. And it is actually explained over there. But what was the idea? If I go back here, if I go back and if I follow the funnel approach, as we said, motivation, need analysis, background. What is the problem? Why is it important? We are actually addressing all these things through the use of funnel approach. So from the perspective of motivation, as I said, we were interested in building the competencies of the persons with disabilities in the area of digital marketing. Why digital marketing? Because we are the experts in this area. This is our expertise. I cannot teach them quantum mechanics because I'm not familiar with it. I cannot build rockets. I'm not familiar with it. I can teach them in digital marketing. So this is very important thing you need to emphasize. And this is why you are actually showing to the reviewers, besides all these technical things, that you are competent in delivering this project. So from this perspective, we are explaining that we are building the competencies in digital marketing, and this is the motivation for us to initiate it in the first place. In terms of needs analysis, this is not a mandatory part, of course, but you can do very nice things here. We did it actually for this proposal. You can do a pilot study, and you can create a questionnaire, and you can have a sample of, let's say, 100 persons with disabilities, and give them a questionnaire to ask them about their familiarity with remote work in general. And then, on the basis of this pilot study, you can say, okay, our results are showing that there is a clear need in terms of upskilling and reskilling for these people. And in this way, you're simply showing to the reviewers again that this research was based on some evidence and some data before. Of course, it can be from the literature or it can be on your side. We definitely didn't have the literature as a background for this class. What is the problem, as I was explaining earlier? The problem with the people who are unemployed and in risk of poverty. Why is it important? Because it is 15% of the world's population in potential risk of unemployment and poverty. And we are offering a solution, not for everybody, but we are offering a solution for a specific aspect of the virtual labor market related to remote work. And we are building their skills in this regard. So we have clearly started from a broad perspective, and we led the person reading our application and our introduction actually to the specific point when we said, this is the problem, this is the solution, and this is the value that we are providing, and that's it. When you have these things set, I doubt that there will be a reviewer who will be scoring this part of your applications with a low score. So it is important to do it properly, of course. But you have the example here. Please feel free when you have the time to read and to simply see those things that I marked in the application for you to have an even better understanding. But I hope that I managed to explain you the core idea behind this. As I said earlier, your reviewers, they are experts, but they are not maybe 100% match for the area that you're investigating. And in my opinion, very rarely they will be, depending again on the research, of course. But the idea is to educate them as well. So, as I said, give your proposal, introduction, since we are dealing with introduction here. Give your introduction to one of your colleagues who is preferably out of this area to read it and to tell you whether the person understands the point of your research. If it is all clear and set in a proper manner, you are good to go. If not, do the changes. Statistics, as I said, of course, provide statistical data. I could have used the approach here in this introduction and say, okay, there are many persons with disabilities. This is inappropriate, and you will receive a negative comment here, 100%. Provide statistics. If you say there are persons with disabilities, search for the data and provide the source, saying 15% of the world's population are persons with disabilities. And this is how, from the perspective of the reviewer, you are actually emphasizing the significance of the problem and consequently your research in terms of providing the solution. Do not hesitate to put a graphical representation of the project areas. And I put here one example simply for you to see how you can do it in a very easy manner here in the introduction. Simply, there are some targeted groups that you're targeting with your proposal. This is for another project that we were working on, but the core idea is the same. This is not a mandatory thing, but as I said earlier, imagine that you receive the application which has 40 pages and 40 pages of text for the reviewer. Imagine if you were the reviewer. It would be very hard to read those data, to analyze it, to understand it, etc. Make the life easier for the reviewer by providing these things, putting tables, putting graphical representations. It will simply and definitely have an impact in terms of making a much better final impression. Do not hesitate. Okay, we put already those things. So this is from the perspective of the introduction. Before we proceed, please, do we have some comments, questions, suggestions, anything? Dr. Andri, please.
The beginning. I just want to tell you that I have gotten European grant, I've gotten rejection for European grant, I've got a case for KFAS grant, and I got rejection from another KFAS grant. And I just want to point that sometimes we trip over small stones. We do all the good things and the great things correct, but we have those little things. And just that Dr. Khalil told us, because I took this session with Dr. Khalil also in the engineering department, he basically told us that purpose of us is to build research of funded by the 1% of the stock market in the KFAS stock market profit.
Dr. Andri, sorry
And
for cutting.
for
some
mostly
reason you're
for-
lagging. Can you maybe you can switch off your camera? It will be easier. You're lagging. I cannot understand you, to be honest.
Yes. No, so basically he said, without a Kuwaiti researcher on your team, you have a great potential of getting out of scope.
Okay, this is the requirement. Dr. Andri, as I said, next time we will have Dr. Khalil with us. He will be
There's
explaining
they explicit now.
Sorry, Dr. Andri, I didn't understand anything, to be honest.
No, okay.
Definitely, there will be a chance for us to discuss it. But the idea, in terms of those requirements, such as having Kuwaiti citizen in the application, etc., these are the things this is the reason why Dr. Khalil will participate next time, to explain these things, because he is much more familiar than I am with the requirements of KFAS. At the moment, I'm telling you from the scientific perspective, the things which are important to prepare the KFAS grant. This is the idea. So scientific aspect of the story. And definitely we will discuss those requirements, additional requirements as well. This is also important. Dr. Omar, please.
Thank you, Dr. Vladimir. Just want to share this, if you don't mind. I'm just going to share my screen. I am currently a reviewer for KFAS, and so usually they would contact us and so on and so forth, and then they would provide us with this document. And I could share it if you want, whenever you want. So basically, we review papers or proposals based on this criteria. So we give points. So for example, originality has 10 points. And then if you go to scientific merit, 40 points. And it goes on. And this is the way most proposals are actually scored back in KFAS. And then once you see the score, you could actually decide as a reviewer whether it is declined or conditional funding or funding, and so on and so forth. And the score should be 100. So basically, to fund, you need to have a score of 81% and above. And that's how tough it is in KFAS. However, you could get conditional funding, which is 61% and above. Whenever you want, I could actually, share this with you and we could discuss it.
Perfect, Dr. Omar. Of course, please send it to me and I will upload this file in the folder with the materials from this training, simply for other colleagues to have the access. Actually, the review form I gave earlier is following this logic. Yeah. Simply, this is the same form that the reviewer uses and provides that with the data. But it would be a nice thing. I was trying to find the empty actually form. So it would be a nice thing to have it on one side, on the other side with the comments of the reviewer. So for the colleagues to be able to analyze and to understand the requirements. This is the core idea. Absolutely here. Thank you so much, Dr. Omar. Okay, my dear colleagues, I believe that we have enough time to cover another part of the application, which is related to setting the objectives. I noticed, to be honest, on the basis of my experiences in reviewing some grants, internal seed grants, and seeing some applications for KFAS, that in some cases simply people fail to do this part properly. So my idea is to try to provide you with some guidance in this regards and some things and tips that could be beneficial in terms of preparing this part of your project application. So when it comes to setting the objectives, this is again a help text from KFAS. It says, the objectives of the research project should summarize what is to be achieved by the study, focusing on the research question and hypothesis. The objectives should systematically address the various research questions and specify the anticipated findings and their impact on the research problem. This is one way of setting the objectives. To be honest with you, I tend to set them in a bit different manner, but in general, it all comes to the same conclusion. So what is the idea with the objectives? And the main thing you should ask yourself. You have identified some problem in the research, and you are offering some solution for the problem. The core thing, and this is the way I would definitely suggest you to do, is to first of all specify the main objective of your research. And on the basis of the main objective of your research, later to use it for the purpose of on identifying, first of all, some specific objectives that your research will have. To show you what do I mean by this, I'm going to go back to this application again to show you the objectives. So we have explained earlier what is the issue, what is the problem, how we see the solution, what are we focused on, and then, as you can see here, on the basis of the stated challenge, it says, following the stated challenges, the main objective of this project is to develop the mechanisms based on scientific evidence to build the digital marketing skills and competencies of the persons with disabilities, which will help them to take a part in the remote work opportunities existing on various remote work platforms and offered by different businesses. Of course, as I told you, this is not a mandatory thing. For some proposals, definitely yes. But for example, for KFAS, it is not a mandatory thing to have a main objective. Instead, they are looking for main hypothesis. We will discuss this part. They introduced it last year. We will discuss it next time when we discuss the platform. But the idea is, and simply a suggestion, I think it makes sense to do it in this manner. Simply to provide a general objective. What are you trying to accomplish here? What was the problem? What are potential solutions? And what are you trying with your research? And how it is relevant. This is also a very important thing here. How this research of yours and the objective that you have set is actually relevant for the strategic priorities of the call and some strategic documents. In case of Kuwait, with some KFAS strategy, this is one type of the strategic document, Kuwait 2035 vision, etc. Simply try to align them and to align them with those, of course, thematic areas which are also covered in that call that we had a chance to examine last time. So from this perspective, definitely, as I said, my suggestion would be to go with one main objective, and on the basis of this main objective to specify and identify, as you can see here, some specific objectives of your proposal. On the basis of those specific objectives, when the time comes for some more complex project calls, such as Horizon, you will actually create something called work package. This is the thing that doesn't exist in KFAS call. They call it task schedule, and this is a Gantt chart actually for the activities and the tasks that you have for your project. When the time comes, I will explain you more. But the idea is that on the basis of your objectives, later on, you will identify the tasks. So for example, let me go back one more time in this application. This was the overall goal, to develop mechanisms to build the competencies of the persons with disabilities in the area of digital marketing. This is the overall goal. But on the basis of that overall goal, later on in the part with the objectives, just give me a second to find it. Yes, we have specified here, in order to achieve the main objectives, the project will follow some specific objectives. And the first one, to conduct in-depth analysis of the platforms for remote work and their requirements in terms of digital marketing skills and competence. Very specific thing that we are going to do here, to simply conduct mapping and to see what are the requirements in terms of skills and the offering of the remote positions actually in the remote work platforms. The second objective, derived from the main one, to develop the methodology. Why? If you want to build a person's competencies in some area, when it comes to digital marketing, let's say, we need to, first of all, we need to assess their current competencies in this area to see whether they are familiar with remote work at all, and whether they are familiar with digital marketing, and whether they have some skills in these regards. So the specific objective must be to develop the methodology and to conduct, on the basis of that methodology, to conduct a relevant assessment. Again, the next step and the next objective, to use the methodology to assess their levels of skills and competencies. Why? Because on the basis of the assessment, later, you will identify the gap between their knowledge and the requirements of the remote work platforms. And on the basis of that gap, in the following objective, as you can see, to develop and deliver the training program for those people, which will be scientific based on scientific data, on the levels of their knowledge, and to help them build their knowledge and their competencies actually in the area of digital marketing. And finally, since you will gather a lot of data in the whole process, to use the data to evaluate the achievements of those people and to investigate the factors which are causing some people to perform better compared to some others. This is the core idea. And here you have a full sequence of things that you need to do to be able to fulfill the main objective, to be able to address the problem that you have identified in your research and in the literature actually. So this is the way how you should specify, as I said, first of all, main objective, secondly, specific objectives. And please use the infinitive for these purposes. To do something, to make something, to develop something, to measure something, etc. These are the things that you need to do to be able to achieve the main goal and the actual aim and the purpose of your study. So this is why it is important to specify it in this manner. And this is the first aspect of the story. I believe that we have the time. Yes, we will have enough time for the second aspect. Second aspect, as I was saying earlier, please don't just make statements, and especially, please, don't make too complicated statements. As you can see here, these are all one-sentence statements. They need to be, as you can see here, use something I'm sure you're familiar with, SMART approach. It needs to be specific. What exactly are you going to do in this specific objective? What is your plan? What are you to develop a platform, to develop methodology, to assess? This is the plan, and this is very specific. For those who are reading, they will understand what is the core idea. Then it needs to be measurable. This is the part that which I would like to emphasize very. To be honest with you, I didn't use so far this approach for my KFAS grants for a very simple reason. I noticed that in these 2 years that I'm submitting proposals, simply the competition is gradually increasing. So in my opinion, it is not a good approach to reveal everything immediately, but try with the things you think are acceptable at that point. And when the competition increases, try to do your best and to improve it even further. So from that perspective, when it comes to measurable objectives, I don't have it in my KFAS grants, but I would like to show you how those things are good to be applied and how they are measurable, because the person evaluating the proposal can ask you, okay, this is the objective. How you are actually going to confirm to me and to somebody who's interested that you actually achieve this objective. And when? This is also an important question. You can set an objective which is completely unrealistic. You have a duration of, let's say, 1 year or 2 years or 18 months. The question is, I can say, I would like to fly to the moon. But the question is whether I'm capable in building a rocket in 16, 18 months and flying to the moon. So from that perspective, it is important to provide the data on the time frame and measurement of the way you plan to achieve this goal. So from this perspective, for example, for the first one, this is the sixth one, it is irrelevant. To evaluate the achievements of the people with disabilities, how? It says here, the following indicator will measure the realization of this objective. Data set on digital marketing skills and competencies of the persons with disabilities, which will be, as you can see here, in project month 23 of the project realization. And here you specified everything. If you did this and completed this objective completely, you will definitely have a data set because you have assessed the achievements of those people. You used some tools such as questionnaire, for example. You have collected the data and you have a data set. And this is the way to measure how you achieve this goal. And you specified exactly when it is expected for this goal to be achieved. So in this manner, definitely this is a good approach to make the objectives that you're setting for your proposal to be, first of all, as I said, specific. This is very important. Measurable. So I say I will measure it by data set. Or I plan to publish a paper or to submit a paper. This is more realistic. And you can say this objective, for example, to disseminate. This is also one of the objectives in the application, to disseminate, for example. And you can say we will measure this objective by submitting a paper for publishing in project month 15, for example. And everything is clear. So it needs to be achievable. As I said earlier, you can fly to the moon, but can you have everything ready in a matter of 6 months or 1 year or 2 years? So it definitely needs to be achievable within the duration of the project, a realistic thing, nothing else. It needs to be relevant. This is, of course, very important, but unfortunately, in some cases, people tend to put some things which are completely irrelevant to the topic and to the main purpose. For example, it is convenient for me, let's say, it is convenient for me to gather students to do the assessment of their digital marketing skills and competencies instead of these persons with disabilities. And the main idea of my research project is to do it on a sample of persons with disabilities. The core question here is how this is relevant for me. If I put to measure and to assess the competencies of the students, what is the connection between that and the core purpose of the study? Completely irrelevant. So the reviewer can say, okay, sorry, this specific objective is absolutely relevant for the topic and for the main objective. So you are actually deriving your specific objectives, of course, from your main objective, and they will represent a phases in your research. Why am I emphasizing this word phases? Because later on, your methodology will be built upon that. For every phase of your research, you will have a certain methodology that you will apply. But we will discuss this part next time, definitely. And time bound. By saying I would have my specific objective measured by data set in project month 23, I defined the time limit and the expectation in terms of completing this specific objective. So from the perspective of the objectives, definitely I believe this is it. Yeah. From the perspective of the objectives, we can conclude on the basis of the challenges that you have identified for your research. My advice, of course, it's up to you. I tend to identify first of all the main objective of this research, as you saw that example I gave earlier. And then, of course, when it comes to the main objective, I put some notes here. You can highlight it in some different color. You can put it, I don't know, under some frame or something. It is very important. Try to associate that main objective of your research, the way we did it here. Try to associate it with some strategic documents, with some information provided in the call, with strategic priorities, thematic areas, etc. Simply to show that your research is aligned. This is extremely important thing. From the perspective of KFAS, as I said, that can be a KFAS strategy or Kuwait vision or some other strategic document, again, depending on the type and the nature of the research that you are undertaking. So it is always a good option to simply elaborate briefly and to make a connection with those strategic documents. And as I said, provide specific and identify specific objectives on the basis of main objective and try to make them smart, to be simple to understand and to read and concise, actually, to be measurable in terms of the output. And why this part, this is something I omitted, why this part with the output is also important. If you recall at the beginning of today's session, I said, later you will have a part with a research output. Please make sure and be aware of the fact that not only papers for the conferences and journals are your research output. It can be a data set. You can deposit your data set somewhere. This is also a research output. It can be a tool, but by identifying your specific objectives in this manner, you will be able to have them all. And when the time comes, you will simply collect them from here and put them in your research output. Of course, elaborate them in more details if needed. It will be needed, definitely, and that would be it. So from the perspective of the things that we managed to finish for today, definitely there is still for us to discuss methodology part, the part with the impact, the part with the anticipated outcome. These are the things that we will finish next time, and then we will dedicate some time to the KFAS platform and those supplementary materials. But the conclusion when it comes to this part, before you start writing, prepare yourselves as per those guidance and instructions and some tips I gave earlier, and they are available in this file, of course. And when it comes to setting introduction, this is an approach I would advise for any kind of research output, for papers, for conference papers, for research grants. Use the funnel approach. Answer those questions. Use that example I gave you here simply for those who are less experienced to simply understand the core point of the things I was trying to explain today. And on the basis of the identified problem, specify the main objective of your research and how you plan to tackle the problem actually that you have identified. On the basis of the main objective, identify specific ones, and it's up to you. As I said, I don't use them always, but definitely those are a good thing to do, to use a smart approach and to make them measurable and to make them bound to some time constraints. And from the perspective of the things planned for today, most of the things we actually covered. Before we finish, I would like to answer if there are any further questions or comments regarding the things that we were discussing today, or if there is any need for any further clarifications in this regards. All good. Perfect. If all is good, we will see the results very soon, my dear colleagues, when we receive internal seed grants and hopefully some KFAS applications and some external, of course. Dr. Walid, please. I think I saw.
Hello, Vladimir. Thank you very much for this nice presentation. In fact, just wanted to confirm with you, Dr. Vladimir. It seems that from the example that you showed us, that KFAS, they have kind of a preference for the topics that have practical contribution or practical implications. Let's say helping disabled people to be easily placed in jobs. And I know I attended your KFAS presentation last year on the digital entrepreneurial competencies, which is definitely, very needed but very practical. So my question, for example, if we have something that, for example, focuses on testing new relationships between variables, but that does not really have significant practical evidence, just to advance the science and build up on the theories that exist, is that something that could undermine the chances of getting that accepted? From your experience, I know you're not involved, with the...
Of course,
Thanks.
of course. Thank you, Dr. Bali. Definitely, you are completely right. I'm trying to find something here simply to show to all of our colleagues. Just give me one more second, please, to open it. This is a KFAS call. And when you take a look at the call and the information available over there, you will see something important as a partial answer to your question. It says here, basic and applied proposals, policy research, and young researchers. So definitely the fundamental science is also something that can be financed. On the basis of my experiences, and I think I read somewhere a note about these things, is that the preference will be given to the practical, to the research with the practical implication for the society. So from that perspective, if you ask me personally, Dr. Walid, I would say that the chances of receiving a KFAS grant are higher if there is a clear practical implication on the research that you are planning to undertake. But if you read the call, you will definitely see that basic research is also covered.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, there isn't anything else I can add. These are the things I know, and I can continue.
Thank you. Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you very much, my friend.
My pleasure, Dr. Walid. Okay, dear colleagues, is there anything else you would like to discuss in these regards, or we can officially declare the end of this session?
Thank you, Dr. Vladimir. Thank you very
My
much.
pleasure, Dr. Omar, and all my dear colleagues.
Thank you so much.
As I said many times before, please feel free when it comes to the applications. These are the things that I actually really like to work on. I will be more than happy to assist in any possible manner when it comes to preparing the application. So feel free to contact me at any point regarding the things that you're working on. Thank you one more time. And on the following Monday, definitely we will meet again to finish the part with the methodology and other aspects, and of course, the KFAS application system. Thanks again. Have a great day, and we'll be in touch. Bye.
Thank you, boss.
Always.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Vladimir.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Bye-bye.